no idea how much we have to spend with our kids all week, and we have no time. It's like, okay, let's talk about that. Like, I love my kids, but my kids are on mission with me. We're together on this. I'm not just farming them off to something and then leaving them. Like, I want them to be in life with me, and I want to be in life with them. So, like, can we talk about how much is too much? Have you bought into the world system that you've got to, like, kill your kids through every activity so they have the best opportunity to make it in life? Or do you believe that God might actually be able to work and do a great thing in your kids if they at least have a kind of decent life of not trying to do everything? I mean, I watch kids, they're running ragged. And I'm like, I'm glad I'm not growing up in this day and age. Man, I got to go have fun when I was a kid. Like, I had freedom and like space, but now it's like, if you don't get your kid in the right soccer program and play all year long and fly around the country to prove that he's got what it takes so he can finally get a scholarship at a school that you've already paid for anyway because of all the cost it took to get your kid through soccer for the last 8 years. Like, just do the math. You already paid for a college education. If you just would have saved that in a money market fund that actually accrued interest, you'd have all your kids paid for, right? And they'd probably have a much more rested life. But we're buying into the idea that we've got to sell out. And it's like, man, my kid's very athletic. I let Caleb make a decision about whether he wants to be in sports or not. I'm not forcing him to do anything. And he's playing when he wants to, and we're having a great time. He's a disciplined kid. He gets up and works out on his own. It's great. I don't need him to be a professional soccer player or football player. He wants to be, but I'm not going to drive him to be. So I'll let him work that out as I teach him how to be a disciplined young man. So I know that the reason why I stopped is because I know that's an issue, right? As you're leading people, it's going to come up in this process. A hand went up, yeah.
Yeah, so just to clarify, you're saying that you've been with these people for a little while, they understand rhythms, they understand the gospel, they understand identity, and then you go through that process.
That's right. So like what I'm doing right now is I'm starting all over with my group. I am a called leader. I am qualified. Okay, my wife and I know a few other leaders that are coming in. So I'm starting with, there's about 5 of us who will lead this new missional community together. They're each going to have different roles. We're talking about that. We're just getting started. So I know I've got called and qualified leaders, and they know what the mission is. Okay, and now we're getting together to talk about what their roles will be as we work out the gospel and our identity. It'll probably take me to January till I have a clarified covenant, because we'll probably work through this process in December and January. If that makes sense. That's my timeline. So, and I know for me that means we probably won't really start practicing it till sometime after Easter, because it takes a while for people to adjust their rhythms, and it won't get really good for probably a year. And I'm just okay with that timeline. So I don't force it. And by the way, I don't expect everyone that's in my missional community, because some of the people who will join us are going to be non-Christians. Some are brand new in the faith. I'm not expecting them all to be able to live this out. But the people I'm making the covenant with are the people who I know are called to it. And then the people who we're trying to reach, I'm not expecting them to agree to any of this. They're just going to get in the wake of the goodness of the gospel in our community. And it'll happen to them. And then later on, they're going to go, like, oh, of course you do this. This is what you did to me. By the way, how you disciple people is how they're discipled. I know I'm saying a lot of those things that are obvious, but we keep thinking, oh man, they'll be disciple makers if they come to church on Sunday. Just so you know, they think now discipleship is inviting their friend to church on Sunday, because that's what you did with them. Whatever you do with them, they're going to reproduce. So if they can see that mission was happening during the week and Sunday was part of it, they're going to actually integrate a holistic discipleship life. And you won't have to teach them a new thing because you did it with them. The only people you have to teach this to are people who've been in the church all their life and haven't been on mission in the everyday stuff of life. That's the hardest work. I'm convinced it was harder for Jesus to go to Jerusalem than to go to the Gentiles. Because they had this years and years and years of empty religion that they had to be saved from. And for many of us, that's the church. The church needs to be converted, some of them to Jesus, I'm convinced. But many of them to Jesus' mission. And there's a few conversions ahead for some people that you'll be leading. And I don't mean regeneration conversion. I mean, a conversion is a change of heart. So they'll have to have a change of heart. Some of them do need to come to know Jesus. Every time I do Gospel Fluency, I assume there are people in the room who don't know Jesus yet. And I can't tell you how many times I've had pastors come to me and say, I just got saved today. I've been in the church, working for the church, and I never knew Jesus. I talked about him, just didn't know him. And if that's the case, I'm sure there's lots of people in the church that know about Jesus but don't know Jesus. And so just know that even this process sometimes leads Christians to come to faith in Jesus. Because what gets revealed is they just were in an empty religion that was doing the moralistic, legalistic pathway of what Christianity looks like, which is kind of a practice of morality and a practice of going to church. But they didn't really know Jesus yet. So know that you're going to get to lead some people to Christ just by calling them to Christ in this. So, yes.
What is the lifespan, have you seen within that, your particular little,
Yeah, so
where do you say
yeah, the one I would led in Tacoma, it had about an 11-year lifespan with lots of people leaving to start new ones. So I was the consistent factor in that one, my wife and I, and then some of our neighbors who we reached out to who just continued to live next to us, so they were going to stay in life with us. And then I would bring in younger people who I would train, equip, and send out. And so, and Nikki, you know about her story. She's since passed away. She was a part of it from day one, because we're not going to send her out. Like, she's our mom, our grandma, you know. That not literally, but those of you who know my story, that she became that to us. And then her daughter and her grandson are part of that mission still. And her grandson came to faith a few months after she passed away through watching how we loved her. So it was a really cool story that I'll get to tell maybe later, another time, not with us today. But so for me, that was a 12-year process. But then the transition of multiplying out was anywhere between 9 months to 2 years, depending on which group God gave us and whether I had leaders that were ready to go. I, as a guy who's pretty good at equipping people, I always handpicked people to join my group to equip. So like when I was at Sunday Gathering, I'm like, Lord, show me who's next that I'm supposed to pour into, pull under my wing, develop and train up so I can either send out or they can take more of the leadership of this group when I have seasons where I can't do as much. So there were times when I sent out 2 or 3 missional communities at a time out of mine. And sometimes that really hurt. You know, by the way, if you believe in a multiplication kind of process, you've got to teach your people how to grieve. Because it hurts to see people go. And so for me, I tell our people now, when we're going to multiply out, we got to take a season to celebrate all that God did, have lots of parties, lots of tears. If we don't grieve this, some of you are going to be emotionally stunted. And just like a funeral, a good funeral is lots of tears and lots of laughter, right? Especially if it's Jesus' funerals, because we're celebrating them going to be with him. And so they've got to do that so then they can have a heart ready to do it again. Otherwise, what they do is they say, I'm not doing that ever again. That was too painful. I'll never lose again. And then for me, some of the people I just said, we always told people, you don't ever have to leave. I tell my kids this, by the way. I'm like, you never have to leave home, but you will want to leave home. If we train you up in the way you should go well, then you'll want to go someday and start your own family. And so my job is to train you so you'll want to, but you never have to. And the same thing I think is true in your missional communities. Like, we want to train people so someday they're going to want to go reach people on their own with a community that they get to develop, but they don't ever have to leave. I tell my group, you never have to leave, but you're going to want to. And I found, man, when you train up people and develop them, they finally go, man, I want to reach this group of people in my neighborhood. Great, let's help you do that. So, and that's a longer process, that process of developing and training. But let me encourage you, if you don't start with that in mind in the beginning, then everybody will believe that this is a forever family that will never multiply. And you have to help them think of family in less like a nuclear family that's always together and more like a healthy family that has many generations. Still has family reunions. Like I still get together with the people who are the very beginning core of my very first missional community, and we celebrate the last 12 years together. And just say, man, you remember when it was just us, the 6 of us in our house, or actually in your condo downtown? Yeah. And we just tell stories. All the lives that we've seen. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have come to faith in Christ over the years because of the mission. And we just celebrate. And you got to do that, because otherwise people are like, you mean we're going to say goodbye and never be together again? No way. Are you kidding? Let's get together. Let's celebrate. Same with family reunion together. So you got to be mindful of that in multiplication. Just like Paul would go out, Then he'd come back and get to be with the Antioch family again. And of course, then for him, it was other families along the way because he had started so many churches. So, okay? Makes sense? Did I answer that question? Okay. Yeah. So that leads us to a shared leadership model. Can I go there? Okay. Unless there's another question about this. Yes. So everyone does things differently. Randy, who's now leading in Tacoma, he said they're now doing it every quarter. He felt like there was enough seasonal shifts that they need to stop and go, for the next 3 months, what might we need to adjust or rethink? And a coach helps with that. For me, it was always like just at least once a year you should say, let's think about reforming this. Our coaches, their job is to pull out the covenant and say, what did you guys agree to? How can we help you live that out? And just let me give you a piece of just my own experience, and hopefully it's wisdom. Don't try to get the group to do what you want them to do. I don't mean like if you're a missional community leader. I mean if you're a coach, like if you're an elder or a leader in your church and you're going, I want them all to do this. What will happen is they'll feel like you gave them a new legalism. And it will crush the creativity, and the Spirit of God at work in them will just be quenched. I let people figure it out. I go, here's a guide, a template. You guys figure out what you think it would look like if you believe the gospel, how you would love like family, live as servants, and be on mission to a people group. What do you think that would look like? And the first year when someone forms one, it's not very good usually. It's either way over the top, like they're like overly idealistic, and you're like, they'll never do half of this. Or it's so under committed that they almost do nothing. But I let it be. And I just say, then let me coach you to that. You guys happy with that? You think that'll help you make disciples who can make disciples? If they say yes, I say, okay, great. And then I coach them to it. And while we're doing coaching, which we do once a month coaching session with them, I'm saying, how effective has the plan been? Are people coming to faith in Christ? Are you getting to know unbelievers and being in their life regularly? What would you adjust if you could change it? And over time, they realize, man, this wasn't very good and I could build it better. That's okay. So because if you're helping them and training them and coaching them, they'll get better at it over the years. And I've watched groups, year 1, not so good, year 2, much better, year 3, it's like you don't even hardly have to help them. If they really got it, they're going to be able to take it and do it themselves. So that's how we look at it. But it's seasonal in terms of you might want to stop and say, does it need an adjustment? And depending on your culture, it's also seasonal. Like where I'm at, there's only 3 months of the year where people come outside. I mean, like, and stay outside. I mean, we all go outside and get wet. But no one wants to hang out on their back porch and talk with people while they're getting wet. So they kind of go into a cave. And a lot of times that's a lot of depression in Seattle because of it. It's why there's great coffee and great beer, because it's how they're dealing with it. Like, got to get up and go to work and got to go home and deal with my depression. So I'm not kidding, man. I'm just, pay attention to where good, I know you guys just got listed as the best beer place or whatever. But, yeah, I know, whatever. But your coffee's not very good. Let's just be clear. I'm just kidding. No, I haven't had it. What I had this morning was great. Your coffee was great. So great pour over. Thank you. But we are coffee snobs out there because we need it. Anyway, just to say, so then we have to think through how do we use our summer very differently than we do the rest of the year. Because it's very intentional time to be with lots of lost people. So most of the groups I coach, I tell them, don't do a Bible study all summer long. This is a time to have parties and cookouts and have all your friends that don't know Jesus over. Like, you're not righteous because you study the Bible a lot. You're righteous because Jesus is the living word written on your heart by His Spirit, and you're supposed to memorize it and meditate on it and be devoted to it and live it. So if you just sit around and talk about it, you're not actually doing what it was meant to do, which is change your life and lead to a new way of living. So, by the way, it's one of my biggest pet peeves is the number of Bible studies Christians have that they never ever do. They just sit around and talk about the Bible and never obey it. And when it said they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, you know that they didn't have a Bible, right? There was no written word back then. There were written words that they carried around a scroll, but they didn't get to walk with a Bible and have Bible studies in their house. They had to say, what did he say again? He said that Jesus did this and he did that. Okay, well, what does that mean for us? How do we devote ourselves to the apostles' teaching? It wasn't let's sit around and have a Bible study. It's how do we obey the Word of God? How do we trust Him and then obey? And so it's very different. In fact, I'd encourage you, if you're trying to transition a Bible study to a missional community, just start asking people to take what they studied and say, if we believed it, how would we obey